we pick up from where we left last time, where Natsuko collapsed from exhaustion after using her new powers for the first time. The next chapter of the story kicks off with a short expositional sequence about a tale of perishing's world building. Each of the 9 countries there have a sun-like thing called a soul future. While these upload the happy and flourishing lives of the people, the Void's monsters that appear one day aim to eat the soul futures. If they eat all 9, the great void that brings the end of the world will appear. Man, never thought I'd enjoy a history lesson. The best warriors of the lands meant to stop this from happening are the 9 soldiers. And while all of them work hard, Luke is the one who crashes out tremendously from the losses he faces. As the exposition comes to a close, Natsuko's eyes begin to open, awakened from her 3-day-long slumber, only to find herself in a fancy and unfamiliar room. Rising from the bed, the girl's in the middle of checking out this room when Luke pulls up out of nowhere and starts bombarding her with questions about her origins and identity. Luckily for Natsuko, her stomach answers for her, and Luke has the decency to grill her up some food before grilling her any further. While Natsuko's eating, Luke is blown away by one thing after another. First by her expression of wonder when he pushes the hair out of her face, and then by just how much she knows about him thanks to having consumed the world's story so extensively in the real world. Brody most certainly thinks she's a creep. After Natsuko asks for seconds and thirds and fourths, man, she can really pack it in. The two get to the topic of her powers. A conversation which ultimately goes nowhere, though as Natsuko finds herself unable to activate the power at will. It does, however, land them in a pretty compromising position when Natsuko leaps at Luke for grabbing her peg bar away from her. Because even in another world, trope's got a trope. Just then, Unio walks in on them alongside Memerun and immediately calls Natsuko a gremlin, which leads to the girl giving the talking horse an earful for a bunch of stuff she can't even begin to understand. Seriously, why rant about how much you spent on merch when you spent it? Friggin' turbo weeb. Before the one-sided argument can go any further, though, the group are informed by QJ that the mayor wants to see them, including Natsuko. Being the completely socially inept weirdo with no filler for her intrusive thoughts that she is, Natsuko proceeds to geek out over the mayor's physique as soon as they get to his place. To be fair, look at the dude. And that's only the beginning, as the next person she treats like a zoo animal is the prophet Baobab, utterly scandalizing Luke's party. Baobab herself, on the other hand, is fairly amused. As they get to the reason for this meeting, namely Natsuko's origins, the animator proceeds to infodump like all hell about how this world is just a fictional tale drawn by animators and brought to life by an anime director. Yep, that'll definitely go over well. Sure enough, it all pretty much goes over their heads, but Baobab just chalks it up to the weirdness that comes with the soul futures of their world being eaten. With only one left, weird stuff's been happening all over the place, and their goal now is to protect the final soul future. To that end, she recommends that Natsuko be recruited into the 9 soldiers. That's when Luke shows his true colors, exposing the deep-rooted, if unmalicious misogyny of his character, claiming that a woman can't be an effective soldier. When called out for having no issues with Memerun, he just gives some lame excuse and tries to move on. But instead, everyone else moves on from his nonsense. More importantly, Natsuko drops a hint about void monsters capable of flying that'll show up soon, and then refuses to elaborate out of pettiness towards Luke. After the meeting, Natsuko rushes out to the desert where she first spawned in this world and desperately begs God to reverse her isekai. I'll let you guess how well that goes. Spoiler, not very. Later that evening, cold and alone in the rain, Natsuko finds herself hungry enough to forgo her pride and return to where Luke's party was. After jump-scaring the life out of Luke and Unio with her haggard appearance, she proceeds to trade them info on the next voids to appear in exchange for food. With her previous info being correct, her extensive knowledge on Luke and her drawing skills helping to make her words more tangible, the hero of the story is convinced she's telling the truth. 3 days from now, the Flying Voids show up at the Harvest Festival aboard a mothership and destroy most of the crops, leaving the last city to starve. When questioned about her motivation here, Natsuko explains that as long as she's stuck here without a way back home, there's something she has to protect. And not wanting to admit that something is Luke's spirit, she claims it's food and proceeds to make that one of her core character traits. Sis thinks she's a Saiyan! With that, she declares her plan to accept recruitment into the 9 soldiers simply for the free food and drink at the local tavern that's granted to them. Fair enough, honestly. At said tavern, Natsuko's in the middle of enjoying the local cuisine when she realizes the matron, Naomi, is based on her in-real-life boss since she was a producer on A Tale of Perishing. Small world, I guess. As she thinks about her life back in the real world, Natsuko wonders for the first time if she really wants to go back. About 3 days from then, Natsuko's prediction comes true, and the Flying Void's mothership appears outside the city. Ready for it thanks to her warning, Luke rushes to the city outskirts, forcibly dragging Natsuko alongside him in hopes that she can use her power again. Luckily enough, Natsuko's performance issues subside as soon as Luke leaps into the wholly suicidal battle against the Flying Voids. Not so lucky, however, is Natsuko's peg bar, informing her that she can't draw anything she's already used for her power, so she has to come up with something completely new. Quite literally, scratching at her head, unable to come up with anything, Natsuko has to watch as everyone does their best to fight off the voids, though it's clear they won't last long. Just then, she suddenly has a eureka moment, knowing what she's going to draw and finally activating her power with that in mind. Following the visual treat that is her power activation sequence, Natsuko gets to work drawing her latest weapon at inhumane speeds. With Luke and the others just barely holding on, Natsuko finishes just in time to save them, summoning forth dozens, if not hundreds, of heat-seeking missiles leap out from her canvas. In a display of the superior destructive power of the modern era, Natsuko's creation makes quick work of the Void Army, bringing it to ruin in mere moments and saving the city. Unfortunately for her, that means yet another collapse from exhaustion, and another time being caught in the arms of Luke. Okay, maybe that part ain't too bad. 3 days later, Natsuko awakens and realizes her power knocks her out for the same amount of time she'd normally take to draw the stuff she brings to life. At the same time, not noticing how intently Luke is observing her with the hair properly out of her hair for once, Natsuko munches down on more of his food. The void monsters may be a great threat, but for now, the warmth of the meal and each other's company is all that really matters.